Good afternoon, everyone. We would like to call today's meeting to order. I want to say welcome. We got a lot of people here in the stands today. We don't usually get this big a crowd out to a council meeting, but we appreciate your coming today, and I know a lot of you have one particular issue you're going to address. We have a couple of people here for proclamation signings and things of that nature, and we want to welcome all of you to your council chamber. We're delighted to see you. Want to remind members of council and senior staff who may be addressing the chair today and doing, of course, our regular business of council, we have a little nuance, a little issue today. You'll notice these rather large microphones here. They are all part and parcel of our internet webcasting of our council meetings. And on the bottom of those microphones, there is a switch and a little red light. If the red light's not on, you're not on. All right? So I want to warn you about turning them on if you're called on to speak and so on. Otherwise, when it comes to simply the making of motions and whatnot, a wave that the chair can catch your eye will be satisfactory. With that having been said, we'll move right along to it. First of all, the adoption of the agenda for the meeting of April 6th, moved by Councillor Stoyles, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Other than the additions that have been added that are outside the agenda and outside the booklet, are there any other additions today? Hearing none, we'll call it. All in favor? Contrary-minded, motion carried. We have the minutes of our last meeting to address. This would be the minutes of the public meeting of March 23rd. I'll accept a motion to accept the minutes as presented, moved by Councillor Tessier, seconded by Councillor Lane. Are there any errors or omissions? Errors or omissions from the meeting of March 23rd? Councillor Lane.
Yes, Your Worship, there was one omission. If you look at 193, that was the tender for the diesel-powered lawnmower.
Right.
And at the meeting, when that issue came up, I had raised the whole issue of do we have a policy in the City of Mount Pearl that looks at all of our equipment, whether it be heavy equipment or even small-powered equipment from a energy-efficient green perspective. Right. And as is noted in the minutes, it says that there is no formal policy. Consideration is given to purchasing equipment based on financial, environmental, and sustainable components. At that particular time, I further had requested that this would go forward to the Public Works Committee to look at, and I actually cited the fact that the City of Toronto, as well as a number of other municipalities, indeed do have such a policy that looks at taking green initiatives with all equipment, whether it be, as I said, heavy equipment or otherwise small equipment, and that's not noted here. So I, again, would like to have that noted, and I would like it to go to Public Works to come back with some recommendations for Council.
Thank you. Duly noted. Any other errors or omissions? If not, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Contrary-minded? Motion is carried. Business arising then from the minutes of March 23rd. Any business arising that is not being addressed further on in the agenda?
Yes, Your Worship.
Councillor Lane.
Items here again.
Must be people in the gallery. How are you?
No. Has nothing to do with that. I'm a big mouth regardless.
Have you got your light on?
I do indeed.
All right.
I never turned it off, actually.
Good man.
188, the ramp, the issue that I raised about the ramp coming from the Outer Ring Road into Kenmount Road and McNamara Drive, and that dangerous stop sign which is currently there. Our Director of Public Works and Infrastructure was in contact with the provincial government, Department of Highways, or Work Services, whatever they're called, and it was indicated that this actually falls within the jurisdiction of the town of Paradise. This particular intersection will, or at the very, I'm not sure if it's totally in theirs, and there may possibly be some cost. No cost sharing would be totally Paradise.
I can see that Paradise would have a role. It's probably totally Paradise, yeah.
Yeah. So I think there were some talks that, as I understand it, that the town of Paradise is going to be doing some traffic studies in that general area. I'm not sure if they were looking at that particular intersection or not. So again, I would request to our director and that committee if perhaps we could make contact with the town of Paradise to determine what their plans are for that particular intersection. Because as I said, right now you have that stop sign coming off the Outer Ring Road. And particularly if you're trying to make a left-hand turn to go in towards Donovan's on Kenmount Road, it's extremely dangerous, and something needs to be done with it.
Okay.
I had one other item here. The other item had to do with 227, relating to household hazardous waste. As you recall, at the last public meeting of council, there was a letter which had come forward from the Eastern Waste Management Association as it related to household hazardous waste, and the issue that we now had whereby household hazardous waste, which used to take place in the city of Mount Pearl, which was subsidized by the Multi-Materials Stewardship Board, that funding was now going to be cut in favor of a program which would see residential drop-off at the Robin Hood Bay landfill site. And of course, that would be for not just household hazardous waste, but any residential drop-off. Basically, they're saying that any resident of Mount Pearl or in the region could take their household hazardous waste directly to Robin Hood Bay. That was going to result in an additional, I think, $130,000 a year for that service to the citizens of Mount Pearl.
132.
There you go, 132,000, which is an issue in itself. But beyond that, it came down to the practicality of it, because it's one thing to expect a resident perhaps to have a household hazardous waste day here in Mount Pearl or other municipalities. One thing to expect a resident to come and to bring that waste to the depot. As another thing to expect them to take that can of paint, if you will, and bring it to Robin Hood Bay. I don't believe that's going to happen, and we're going to see more waste end up in the garbage as opposed to actually being recycled in the way it's supposed to happen. So as a result of that, I had brought forward a couple of motions, or suggested a couple of motions at our last meeting, which were deferred. One was to write the Eastern Waste Management, and the other one was to write the MMSB. So I guess I'm just looking for some follow-up on that. I understand there is going to be a meeting held, I think, with our Public Works Committee and the City of St. John's to look at the system which is being proposed. But further to that, have we written or are we writing a letter now to the MMSB asking them to restore the funding, the subsidies, so that we can continue to have household hazardous waste days here in the city of Mount Pearl? I'll ask Mr. Lush if
you don't need to. You don't need to. I can answer it. Letter has been written.
Okay.
I reviewed it today. I'm going to make some changes in it. A couple of things in the letter that I think are incorrect. So I want to do a quick little question and answer with some staff members, and then that letter to the MMSB will be going forward. The other piece, which is the question of whether or not we can ourselves do household hazardous waste days, is still on the dock. That is in the hands of the Public Works Committee. And before we really move forward, as it is said here in the minutes, with anything, we're going to need some information on exactly what it would cost us personally to try and implement some kind of collection and transportation to the waste management site, to the household hazardous waste management site at Robin Hood Bay. I believe that piece of the work is not going to be a significant cost. I believe we're going to be able to do that if we choose. But we don't have the numbers on that piece. But yes, I reviewed the letter today, but well, I'm just not happy with the letter at the moment. So we're going to do some work on it.
Thank you, Worship.
Any other items? Any other items for business arising? Hearing none, we're going to move along. First thing we have today are proclamations, and I want to advise council that we have two today. And the very first one I'm going to do is a proclamation for Parkinson's Awareness Month. We do have Alice Lake here, who is a resident. Wave at me, Alice. Alice is here. Can't talk to me. Can't talk to me, so we're going to just say welcome to Alice. We're delighted that you could come today. I'm going to read the proclamation into the record for council, and I'm going to sign it, and of course, hopefully, by doing so, we'll encourage residents in Mount Pearl to participate in Parkinson's Awareness Month. Nearly 100,000 people in Canada and 1,600 people in this province have Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's is a neurodegenerative disease. It causes tremors, slowness, stiffness, impaired balance, and even trouble speaking and swallowing. Parkinson's affects men and women equally. It's not contagious, and it's not a natural part of the aging process. Although no cure has yet been found, Scientists are working to develop drugs to slow the progression of Parkinson's and to discover the cause and find a cure. The Parkinson's Society, Newfoundland and Labrador, a regional partner of the Parkinson's Society Canada, is the provincial voice for people living with Parkinson's here. Through research, education, advocacy, and support services, the Society endeavors to ease the burden for all of those who are affected by Parkinson's. I invite all citizens of Mount Pearl to join me in wishing the Parkinson's Society a very successful Parkinson's Awareness Month, which is the month of April. And with that, I will affix my signature on behalf of all of Council. And Alice, wish you and all the members of the Parkinson's Society great success with your awareness campaign. I know there will be, no doubt, a little fundraising to go along with it as well. And thank you very much for coming and doing that. Anyone with a comment from Council? Hearing none, we'll move along. Thank you very much. We have a second proclamation today that I have to sign. And I'm going to invite some people to come up here with me. Jan Lilly. Jan, you're here. Bernard Davis, Jim Burton, and Vanessa Froud. Jan Lilly is chair for Volunteer Week for the Volunteer Week Committee 2010. Bernard Davis is the CLB vice chair of Volunteer Week for 2010. Jim Burton is here with Remax Plus Realty. He is the honorary chair this week. Now, who's doing the talking? You're doing the talking?
I can say a few words.
All right. Apparently, you're being voluntold you're talking. And Vanessa Froud, who is the is with the SW Student Canadian Red Cross Volunteer Week Committee member. So I'm going to read the proclamation and sign it. And then, Mr. Burton, I'm going to invite you to address Council. And look at all the good citizens from Mount Pearl who are with us today. You get to talk to. Okay, so whereas the City of Mount Pearl in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador recognizes the enormous contribution that volunteers and voluntary community-based organizations make to the social, cultural, and economic development of our province. And whereas it has been recognized that Newfoundlanders and Labradorians contribute an astonishing 35 million hours of volunteer effort annually. What a number. Resulting in a significant and positive impact on the quality of life for our citizens. And whereas the activity of volunteers is being commended and encouraged across Canada and around the globe, and whereas the City of Mount Pearl acknowledges the theme Volunteers Connect Communities for Volunteer Week 2010, recognizes and shows appreciation to all of our citizens who volunteer and encourages the continuation of volunteerism. Therefore, with the support of the City Council, I sign this proclamation and declare the period April 18th to April 24th to be observed throughout the City of Mount Pearl as Volunteer Week. And I call upon and urge all residents to lend their time and skills to this worthwhile activity. And with that, Mr. Burton, I will affix my signature, and I'm going to turn these over to you. You'll notice a couple of them have been signed. Thank you very much. I'm going to move this and let you address Council.
And I see your red button is on.
And it is.
Well, thank you, Your Worship, and we're here today to celebrate Volunteer Week, which is going to be happening in the province, April 18th to the 24th. And, of course, as we know, volunteers make things happen in our community. And I might add that Newfoundlanders and Labradorians have among the highest donor rate in the country at 91%. That's a huge accomplishment. Volunteers step to the plate. They listen with their hearts. And Jan next to me has dedicated many long hours to the Girl Guides, people like her that help out in the community or contribute to the Boy Scouts, coach baseball games, hockey games, soccer games, volunteers that commit to the elderly in our province, to the schools, to the churches. They add to the life and success of our community. And I might say I'm walking in some pretty big shoes here today, because you, Your Worship, were honorary chair of Volunteer Week in the province some years ago.
2003, actually.
Yeah,
2003. A lot of volunteers sitting around this table, too, in this council.
absolutely, absolutely.
Most of them come to their council seat by being volunteers and being known in the community, you know.
Yeah.
And they still volunteer, thank God.
Absolutely.
Well, we want to thank you and congratulate you and offer all success for Volunteer Week 2010. Volunteers truly are the heart of the community, and that volunteers make community is a good theme for this year, and we want to recognize your work. I know there will be a lot of activities. At my work this morning, I ran into the Honorable Dave Denine, who was the Minister for Volunteer and the Non-Voluntary Sector.
Yes, that's right.
And I kind of ran into him, and he was there actually doing commercials for advertising of Volunteer Week coming up. So it's all coming together, Mr. Burton. Very good.
It is. Thank you so
I want
much.
to congratulate all of you, and thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vanessa, thank you. Nice to meet you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jan, and good luck with the Volunteer Week. Jim, all
you,
the
Your
best
Worship.
with your week. It's going to be a busy one. I can
It
tell you.
is.
I can warn you that right
I'm
now.
looking forward to it.
Thank
you so much.
All right. Does any members of council have a comment or anything you'd wish to add at this point? Councillor Tessier.
In my other life, I volunteered, of course, for many years and still continue to, but in my other life, I rely on volunteers very heavily. And I can say without any hesitation that the good work that we do is entirely a credit to the people that we have volunteering on behalf of us. So again, to all the volunteers in the province, just hats off. Continue what you're doing, and if anybody's ever considered volunteering, step up, do it. It feels really good.
It does. Thank you very much. Thank you again, folks. We really appreciate your coming to do this today. $35 million hours at minimum wage. If all of those people had to be paid at minimum wage, you'd bankrupt the place, wouldn't you? Right? When you think about it. Amazing. Moving on the agenda then. That concludes proclamations and presentations. We're moving to correspondence. We have some pieces of correspondence here. The first is from municipalities Newfoundland and Labrador. It is a copy of a letter, actually, sent by the President Harry Hallett, from MNL. It is to Minister Jerome Kennedy, the Minister of Health and Community Services. It references a motion that we put forward at the annual convention of MNL requesting a ban on the cosmetic use of pesticides in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. MNL wrote that letter, obviously, in support of our position on it, and are now beginning, I suppose what we would have to say is the lobby piece here, to try and see if something can't actually be done to try and have a ban put in place. Does anybody have a comment? A question? We'll move along. The other letter we have is from one of our MHAs, the Honourable Steve Kent, with the District of Mount Pearl North, and he recently delivered an address in the House of Assembly congratulating Mount Pearl's Frosty Festival Committee and the City of Mount Pearl on a very successful 28th annual Frosty Festival. I want to thank him. I reviewed it, and I want to thank him for his very kind comments. By the way, you all know that I think as of yesterday, right, we now have our third MHA back, right? The Honourable Paul Davis was sworn in yesterday, and he said he wants to get to meet the other two councils, so I'm suggesting we drag him in here real soon, right? We should do that real soon and have a meeting with him and talk about some of the things that we think he will be able to do for us with our other two MHAs. The third letter we have is from the Honourable Kathy Dunderdale, the Deputy Premier, Minister of Natural Resources, and this is in reference to a letter that we wrote regarding a review on live animal legislation. Now, this has to deal with the Animal Health and Protection Act. It goes back to some outrageous things that happened in our provincial community, not here in the city at that time, but in our provincial community that prompted really a public outcry. And I think our citizens reflected through our council, through our members here, that they very much wanted us to be heard. This letter is a reply to that call that we made as a city, and I don't know if anybody has any other words or comments. I understand the new act, which is going to increase fines for people who are cruel to animals and whatnot. I understand that act will be coming forward in this session of the House. Anybody with a comment? What a quiet bunch today. Must be the audience or something we've got here. They're not usually this quiet. Here we go. We're moving along. The next one here is, the next one would be, well, The Public Works Committee, I guess, I have this one item, and I assume there's one other. Councillor Tessier. I was going to, oh, okay, this is going to be a committee report. I'm seeing this separate as a memo, just as a separate memo. What I want to do is, well, I'll leave that. Just hang on to that, Councillor Tessier. For everybody here, yeah, I want to take planning and move it forward as our first committee report with the leave of council. If that's all okay, I'm going to turn to the Deputy Mayor. Deputy Mayor Locke. This, so everybody knows, this is the committee that you're all here interested in. So you won't have to stay here for the whole 2 hours.
Unless you want to. I'm not used to speaking this early in our session, so thank you, Your Worship. The first item here, as you said, that most people in our gallery are here to listen to, has to do with the Newfoundland Labrador Housing proposal to reconfigure semi-detached building 5 to 7 Spruce Avenue. Just a background here, a brief summary. In 2009, the city received a development application from Newfoundland Labrador Housing proposing to convert the existing double dwelling at 5-7 Spruce Avenue into structures containing 2 one-bedroom units and 1 3-bedroom unit. The main intent for this was to better meet the demand and the change in demographics. There's a greater demand now for such housing for smaller families. The houses that were built 20 to 25 years ago were 4, 5-bedroom. That was to accommodate the much larger families back then. Mm-hmm. And as we know, over the past 20 to 25 years, the demographics have changed, family size has changed. There's a huge wait list at Newfoundland Labrador Housing to accommodate the smaller family units. So their proposal was to, as a pilot project, they approached the city of Corner Brook, city of St. John's, and the city of Mount Pearl, where they wanted to try a pilot project where they would take an existing structure, not change the footprint, so the building itself would not get any larger in size, but basically to reconfigure the interior in order to make a 2-apartment unit into a 3-apartment unit. So that was basically the details behind the proposal put forth. In order to accomplish this, this particular proposal was not permitted in the Spruce Avenue area because that's currently zoned as residential medium density. And in order to accommodate this proposal, an amendment to the development regulations would be required in order to accommodate the reconfiguration that I just spoke of. Mm-hmm. The proposed amendment and the development proposal would then have to undertake a public consultation process, notification process, again, to obtain any commentary or feedback, basically to get a feel for how the residents in the area felt about the proposal put forth. And again, this is due process. And Newfoundland Labrador Housing Corporation was given due process under our regulations, and that's why we held our public consultation or public notification session. And this was held March 23rd of 2010, and many of our guests here today were in attendance at that session. Public notice of this proposed amendment was placed in the Telegram, posted on our city's website, and distributed to the property owners within the area. The city received a number of written representations, I think up to 20 before the public session. We had verbal inquiries, comments, numerous emails that came forth. And then the night of the session on March 23rd, we had about 40 residents who attended. And at that time, they were given an opportunity to speak to their written submissions to add anything further. And again, most people did. And at the time, everyone in attendance at that session was opposed to the rezoning and opposed to the application by Newfoundland Labrador Housing Corporation to remodel the 1 unit on Spruce Avenue. So attached in your kit, of course, is the director has summarized all the feedback, all the written submissions, verbal submissions at our public meeting, and that's contained within Council's kit there today. And just prior to coming into the meeting, I received a letter actually from Newfoundland Labrador Housing Corporation from Ms. Colleen O'Keefe, a team leader there. And I quote, "After further review, Newfoundland Labrador Housing wishes to withdraw its application to reconfigure number 7 Spruce Avenue." But our Planning and Land Use Development Committee, after looking through this particular proposal, we are still recommending, because there was two parts of the recommendation today, and so I'm going to amend the recommendation that's within your kit. The Planning and Land Use Development Committee recommends that the rezoning application not be supported at this time. So
And that's basically it now.
that's it. So we will not rezone the Spruce Avenue area. Newfoundland Labrador Housing has withdrawn their proposal, so this issue is now dealt with.
It is moved by feel like I should be yelling order. We're not going to do that today. It's too nice. Too nice today. Moved by Deputy Mayor Lockett, is seconded by, I understand that Mr. Aker obviously finds himself in some concern of conflict. I'm looking for a seconder then. Seconded by Councillor Tessier. I'm not sure we're going to have any debate on this, but if you want to open any other comments you wish to make, to open debate.
Well, again, as we said at our public session, NLHC put this proposal forth, and they were granted due process. So we went through the required process to have this issue heard. And I commented, some of the staff mentioned that it was probably one of the largest turnouts that we had at a public briefing session, and which is good to see. I mean, that was the whole purpose of this. And as I know Councillor Lane and I were speaking to some folks afterwards, if you don't show up, council assumes that everything is hunky-dory, okay. And the fact that we heard from you people, that was the intent of the process. This was not the council's proposal, this was NLHC's proposal, and we went through the due process. So as I said at the meeting, it was democracy in action. You guys came out, made your positions known, very passionately, and, council takes that into consideration when we make our decisions. So I just wanted to add that point there, Your Worship.
Any other further comments from members of council? Councillor Walsh, and then
Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Walsh.
First of all, I think I would like at least to extend my thanks and appreciation to the people in the gallery, because obviously, Your Worship, these are the people who spoke loud and clear, and it was your thoughts and opinions on what you wanted for your neighborhood that really swayed the day on that particular night. And so for that, I think you should be commended yourselves as residents of the area. I did mention that night, and I want to reiterate again, Council did turn this original proposal down. I think I mentioned on the night of the hearing. And we turned it down because we were very, very sensitive to all of the issues that you had raised that night. We knew of the problems. Of course, I dealt forthrightly with some of the problems that you had raised. We knew the congestion in the area. We were aware of all of the kinds of problems that are there. And that's why we turned it down. When Newfoundland Labrador Housing came back and asked if it could go to a discretionary process and could go through this due diligence that we're going through right now, obviously we said, okay, we'll do that, but I can tell you pretty clearly, we were pretty certain what the outcome of this would be, even though we had to be very guarded in our commentary on the night of the public hearing. The other thing that I want to say, Your Worship, and I think it's reflective of Council, but I'll speak for myself only. I also want to say that we're very supportive of Newfoundland and Labrador's Newfoundland Labrador Housing Initiative in terms of trying to accommodate the needs, the changing needs, and the changing demographics of their clientele. We support that, and if there are other opportunities in Mount Pearl that are much better located, we would welcome the opportunity to participate fully in that, particularly as it relates to smaller houses that could accommodate smaller families. And part of this proposal was also to make a fully accessible unit. And I just want to go on record as saying we really support that. Not in that neighborhood. It didn't work, it doesn't work, and it doesn't fit. And we support that as well. The only other comment I want to make, with all due respect to my colleague who is in a bit of a conflict and maybe a bit of a sensitive situation, I also think that Newfoundland and Labrador Housing really mishandled this from the get-go. And as a result, this kind of gathering was what basically happened as a result of the poor handling of that. I believe that Newfoundland and Labrador Housing have a tremendously important mandate in public housing in the province, and as I say, I think we will continue to support whatever initiatives we can and that are reasonable for development or redevelopment for that matter, in the city of Mount Pearl. But I hope that there's a little lesson learned on the part of Newfoundland Labrador Housing as well. It's probably the reason they withdrew the application tonight as well. I think they knew that they were facing overwhelming opposition with it. They do great work and throughout the entire province, and there is a tremendous need for more and improved social housing. I just wanted to make those comments, and again, thank the residents for their support, and obviously for expressing so strongly their opinions and the pride that they demonstrated in their neighbourhood.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Councillor Stoyles?
Thank you, Your Worship. As Councillor,
Okay, your light's on. Good.
it's on. As Councillor Welch, I guess, explained, once somebody comes in with a proposal, I guess there's not much we can do, only bring it through the process. But no doubt, housing brought this proposal to us as a pilot project, and we wanted to give the residents, of course, the opportunity to come forward as they did, and we certainly thank every one of you for coming forward. But for the past 14 years or so since I've served on council, I've been involved with helping a number of individuals, even though it's not really our role as councillors to get involved with Newfoundland Labrador Housing. But I've been one of the councillors who've gotten quite active in fighting for people's rights related to housing. I know it was 4 particular homes in Mount Pearl that I went to housing myself and helped them fill out the forms to get individual funding to get the homes redone. Not to count the homes that Newfoundland Labrador Housing own on behalf of the province. And I know up on Farrell Drive I was heavily involved with getting the work done probably a bit faster by helping and being an advocate for the people who lived up there as the people who live on Spruce Avenue. So any residents who feel that they need help dealing with Newfoundland Labrador Housing, no doubt you do have your MHAs, and one of them was here that night. But Greenwood Crescent now, housing is in the process of doing the Greenwood Crescent area, and I had been involved. I know they had complaints with asbestos and mold, and some of the houses down in your areas do have. And I would encourage you to be on the phones with Newfoundland Labrador Housing. They only have so much money, and the squeaky wheel do get the grease, believe you me. And because they only have so much money to put in the housing every year, there's only so many that they can renovate and fix. And we do have a large number of housing units from Newfoundland Labrador Housing in our neighbourhood. So if anybody has a problem, I know I'm one councillor that's willing to help out and act on your behalf. But as Councillor Welch indicated, this is the route that we have to go when somebody comes in, and we just wanted to say that she did a great job, and it was good to see so many people banding together, not only from the Spruce Avenue, but from the other areas of Mount Pearl. And when we come to a public meeting, as we did for a public hearing, we're not supposed to speak out and say, because we're supposed to hear all the facts from both sides and then sit down and make a decision. But I'm certainly glad that this is the decision, and that Newfoundland Labrador Housing did withdraw the proposal today. And they have a lot of, I guess, commitments to fulfill over the next number of years with housing, and we certainly look forward to working along with them, but not in this area.
Thank you. Councillor Lane.
Your Worship, I'm not going to repeat what's been said. I think everybody knows where this council stands on this issue, and it worked out the way it should have worked out. People had their say, we listened, and this is not going ahead. What I did want to raise, though, Your Worship, and I'm assuming maybe some of these things staff have looked at already, I don't know, but if they have not, when we had the public hearing, and I'm just going through the notes here, there was an issue here, or a section here, that talks about promises previously made allegedly by council, and these are things that happen, I guess, over a period of time. A lot of these I'm not familiar with. Maybe they happened a long time ago. I don't know how accurate they all are, because again, it was just opinions of what was said or what was going to be done and so on. But there are a number of items here that talks about the wooded area across from Commander Place that was supposed to be trimmed down, talks about the condition of some of the Newfoundland Labrador housing units that we already have, talks about sidewalks that were allegedly promised at some point in time, issues with the playground and so on. So I would ask staff, I would refer this to staff if they haven't already done so.
Already there.
And ask that they look at each individual item, and if there's things that we can do, we can reasonably do, fine. And again, some of these things are just, information being brought forth by people that may not necessarily be accurate. They mightn't have had all the facts at the time, and maybe they are. And whatever we can do, we can reasonably do. I would like for us to address those issues as well. Thank you.
Yep, I know that all of those items are already there, and will be addressed. Particularly, I recall the sidewalk thing. That's in my time.
Is that right?
I'm too foggy for me to lay it down now, so we need to do a bit of research. But I do remember the issue around the sidewalk piece. Any other councillor? Councillor Tessier? Everyone's having a shot
I was
here.
going to say, I feel a bit of pressure now, really. There really is nothing left to say, except I know when this issue was on our agenda, and when we were discussing, when we had the public consultation scheduled, somebody called me up and they said, sure, what's the point of that? What can I do? Nobody's going to listen to me. And this process proves that, in actual fact, the public consultation does work. It's a democratic process, and we're happy to provide it, and we're particularly pleased that so many people took the time to come and voice their concerns that night. We really appreciated it, and we did listen.
Deputy Mayor? Well, before you close, I want to make a comment, just since you're all here. Just very quickly, on the NLHC properties, I know there's a fear among those who live there. I don't know if we've got any other people who actually live in these NLHC properties with us. But there's a fear among those who live there, and there is a fear expressed by some of the residents on Commander Place and Spruce, because it's been made to me personally, that there's a concern that our turn down of this will see NLHC walk away from those houses, and that regular upgrade won't happen, that somehow there will be a punishment extracted. I want to assure residents personally, because I know the people who run NLHC, and I will be and have talked to them, and will be again. That's not going to happen. There is already an outstanding order for upgrades to occur to the properties in that area, regardless of this decision, which NLHC, by the way, knew what was coming, which is why they withdrew the day. Those upgrades are going to happen. And I just wanted both the residents in the area who've invested so much in your homes, who are concerned about these properties being next to you and not being kept up to snuff, that your council is on top of it. And my understanding from NLHC, the commitment to do that is still going to go ahead. We engaged in a homelessness and housing study in this city. NLHC has been engaged in that process as well. One of the areas that we discovered through a study that was done for Mount Pearl is that there are going to be in our city under-housing issues that involve particularly seniors and subsidized housing, and we need to address it. As a city, council intends to try and do what we can to address it. This was not the road. We kind of told NLHC that in the first place when, as Councillor Walsh pointed out, it was turned down. This was not the road. But we're going to continue to work with NLHC to try and find a road. There are places and there are ways that we can help try and relieve the housing shortage we're really going to have in this area. So we want to do that. I hope that you appreciate that we didn't want to do it without you. First and foremost, being aware of what was going on. And that's what happened here. And with that, obviously, the recommendation is that we reject it. You want to close debate on this, Deputy Mayor? All's been said. All those in favor of the motion that we would not rezone this area, say aye. Contrary minded, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Council. Thank you, folks. With that, I'm going to say to you, if we're really fascinating you, you can stay. But if you're satisfied that you've heard what you need to hear, don't feel guilty in leaving. Thank you. You may go party.
Reminds me of the classroom.
We'll give him a minute, Deputy Mayor, and then
Yes.
we'll just finish your report. Is it me, or is that water really good today? That water's really good. It's cold, yeah. Babel's Big Pond, you will notice. Babel's Big Pond water. It's really good, too. Okay. All right, I think we can continue at this point. Deputy Mayor, if you want to continue on.
Thank you, Your Worship. The second item here is a notice of motion.
Yep.
I'll get it up a little closer so I can see it here.
Here we are.
I don't know if the print is getting smaller or my eyes are
I'm afraid, my friend, it is age.
a little both, yeah.
It's age.
Yes. In accordance with Section 39 of the City of Mount Pearl Act, 1988, take notice that, in accordance with Council's public notification policy, I will, at a regular meeting of Council, move an amendment to the Mount Pearl Development Regulations 1988 that, if enacted, will amend Schedule E, Land Use Zoning Map of the Mount Pearl Development Regulations by rezoning land within the boundaries of the Simcoe Drive Amendment Area attached to this notice of motion from residential medium density to residential single unit detached 3. The intention of this amendment is to provide Council with the regulatory framework to consider development proposals for dwellings of a smaller frontage along Simcoe Drive. Those lands not being rezoned shall maintain their present zoning, dated this 6th day of April 2010.
Thank you.
And the next item, Your Worship, has to do with the Mount Carson Terrace Phase 5 Subdivision Development Agreement. The Planning and Development Department is in receipt of the signed Subdivision Development Agreement for Mount Carson Terrace Phase 5A from the developer Donovan Homes, which is proposing to construct 63 single-family detached dwellings with or without subsidiary apartments as a part of this phase of the subdivision development in the Kenmount Hill area. This agreement has been prepared in accordance with Council's decision with respect to the subdivision. The signing of this subdivision agreement is a condition of the development permit that was issued to Donovan Homes March 2nd, 2010, and it's recommended that approval be granted to yourself, Your Worship, and our CAO, Mr. Lewis, to sign the Mount Carson Terrace Phase 5A Subdivision Development Agreement on behalf of the City Council of Mount Pearl, and I so move.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Locke. It is seconded by Councillor Aker. You're back in the pool.
Back in the saddle.
You're back in the saddle, Councillor Aker. Any question or comment?
Back in the room.
All those in favor? Contrary-minded? Motion is carried.
The next item here, Your Worship, is development permits issued from March 20th to April 1st, 2010.
Right.
We have 6 here. They're all outlined, the details here. I note we have 3 home-based businesses and 3 others for automotive sales, office, medical, and professional, and a membrane accessory building. And I move that these development permits be accepted as presented.
What the heck is a membrane accessory building? Something to do with high flow hydraulics, I guess.
Yeah.
It's, all right.
One of those Quonset hut type things that.
Is it?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, there's one down in the European
Okay.
quite well.
So similar to the Sprung Greenhouse,
that's not what this guy is doing, is it?
Sprung Greenhouse buildings
Style
that we once
thing?
had here?
So it's plastic. Yeah.
Like
Yes.
a sprung structure? Is that what it is, really?
Yes.
All right. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Contrary-minded? Motion carried.
And the last item here, Your Worship, are the building permits for residential and commercial construction for March the 20th to April 1st, 2010. Residential permits during this time total $2,042,000, and our commercial permits during the same time period total $50,000, bringing the total for this period to $2,092,000, and I move that these amounts be accepted as presented.
Moved, seconded by Councillor Aker. All those in favor? Contrary-minded? Motion carried.
And that is it, Your Worship.
Do you have anything outside of the...
Nothing for me, sir.
Nothing for you?
Nope.
We're going to go back then to the beginning where we were supposed to have originally started, which is to go to Public Works. Councillor Tessier, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Worship. A short agenda here for us today. The first item is a tender for the traffic calmer. Tenders were called for the supply and the delivery of 1 electronic sign and radar speed monitor package, with bids that were received from the following suppliers. And United Rentals came in with the lowest qualified bid of $20,641.71. And it should be noted that this is the traffic calmer. We already have one like this in our system in the city of Mount Pearl. We've had it for a couple of years now. And it's proven to be particularly effective when we have issues around speeding traffic.
Seems to work.
Specifically. And the fact that they're portable means we can move them from school zone to school zone if we're having trouble with that, if we're having trouble in some of our major thoroughfares. Again, because some of us don't really realize sometimes when our foot's a little bit heavy, and then when you see it, when you see a sign that says the speed limit here is 50 and your speed is 67, you're going to lift your foot. And you hopefully will become more and more aware even when you don't see that traffic calmer. So I move that this amount be accepted as it's presented and that the tender go to United Rentals.
It is moved by Councillor Tessier, seconded by Councillor Walsh. Question or comment? Will this one, I do have a question. Will this one record speeds for us, like as people go by? I know we see the sign and it says to you, you're going 60 and a 50, slow down. That works. But one of the things I think we can do on the original one is that we can actually go back at the end of the day and see how many people drove that road and how many people were actually speeding. We can actually get a percentage, right? This one going to be able to do that very same thing? Is it the same unit? Mr. Lush?
Yes, Your Worship. It's the same model. It's just a newer model, so it just has a few more enhancements in terms of solar power.
Oh, perfect.
So it lasts a little longer, but essentially it's the same model.
Oh, perfect. Excellent. Anyone, Councillor Stawes, question or comment?
Yeah, I was going to make a comment. Last night on the national news, I was watching up in Alberta. They have a new one up there, and they had actually, it was the city council was talking about buying, it was more of a board, and I'm just wondering if it's something new and something better out there that's even a bit cheaper. They had purchased 20 for the community, and
These were message boards,
these
though.
were, well,
Yeah,
no,
these
it
were,
no, it was the speed. It was the speed would come up, and there would be words saying your speed and everything.
No.
I'm just wondering if there's something else that we can check into, because it was on national news last night on CBC, and I was watching it.
Yeah,
So
I don't know.
I
don't
just
know.
thought it'd be something just to look into.
It's something to investigate, but I don't see us not doing what's in front
No,
of us.
I'm not saying that.
I know, I hear you. All right, we'll call the question then. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion is carried.
And one item outside of the kit. Again, it's a tender call for the scoreboard foundations and structural steel for the soccer facility. The original tender call for the project closed on the 15th. We received 3 bids, and all of them were in excess of the budget that was allocated. So as a result, the original work. Oh, sorry, this is engineering.
I'm just looking at it,
My
but
apologies. My apologies. No, my apologies.
he was going to say, let that rock and roll.
Shall I continue?
Yes, you might as well.
Okay.
You got it in your hands.
I look at tender and I just assume it's Public Works spending money, really. So the tender, as a result, was broken down into 2 packages: structural steel and foundations.
Yeah.
The tenders that are here are for structural steel, and the lowest qualified bidder is Fasco Industries in the amount of $4,950, and I so move.
It is going to be moved by Councillor Tessier and seconded by Councillor Aker.
Why not?
Yeah, I'll second that one.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Contrary minded, motion is carried. That concludes Public Works and a good chunk of engineering. Community Services Committee report. Councillor Walsh.
I'm just wondering if Councillor Tessier would like to do mine as well.
Would Councillor Tessier like to grab onto that one?
Well, why not? All of you sit down.
I got to tell you something, though, Your Worship. We do know how to clear a room.
We did that pretty effectively.
Pretty good, yeah. Just 2 quick items. One involves an expenditure, the other doesn't. The first one is a request from Athletics Northeast in association with the Newfoundland and Labrador Athletic Association. They're going to be sponsoring a marathon, or half marathon, I should say, which is only a short jaunt, 21 kilometers or so.
Yes.
On May 23rd. It starts in Donovan's and runs through the industrial park, finishing at the soccer hut off Smallwood Drive. And, of course, as part of the condition of any of these races, we are named in their insurance liability coverage. They do always, we've worked with them before, Your Worship, provide spotters and support personnel. And unlike the Telegram race each year.
Sorry,
This doesn't
sorry, Dan.
require closure of roads or
Right.
any changes to the lighting system. So with that in mind, I make the motion, and I so move.
Moved by Councillor Walsh, seconded by Councillor Lane. All those in favor? Contrary-minded, motion carried.
I think we definitely got that second. The last item, Your Worship, deals with a replacement of carpet and some ceramic tiling at the museum at Admiralty House. In fact, it's a complete replacing of the flooring there, about 2,600 square feet or thereabouts. We had 3 bids that we received, and the low bidder is who we're recommending that we go with for $6,325, and that would be Baker Flooring, and I so move.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Contrary-minded? The motion is carried. Corporate Services,
Yes, Your Worship.
Councillor Lane.
Okay, the first one, we have a request here for tax consideration. Property tax for 18 Senate Crescent in the amount of $1398.60, and that's properties owned by the Salvation Army. I assume that's the Major's house. We have one for Cooperative Housing Association and one for Canadian Hard of Hearing, in which we are proposing we would waive the business tax as per our policy. Cooperative Housing $377.65, Canadian Hard of Hearing is $7,264.48, and I so move.
It is moved by Councillor Lane, seconded by Councillor Tessier. All those in favor? Contrary-minded, motion carried.
Next, we have invoices for approval, and it's on your revised orange sheet, totaling $308,131.51. I so move.
Moved, seconded by Councillor Tessier. Any questions or comments on items 1 through 8? Item 8 being the Coruscant Drive traffic lights, that's what was added. Hearing none, call the question. All in favor? Contrary-minded, motion is carried.
Your Worship, next item, committee recommends approval for Councillor Stoyles to attend meetings of the Atlantic Mayors Congress being held in Halifax from April the 14th to the 16th. And of course, the City of Mount Pearl is a member of that organization, and Councillor Stoyles will be attending on your behalf.
Yep.
And I so move.
Moved by Councillor Lane, seconded by Councillor Tessier. All those in favor? Contrary-minded, motion carried.
Next item, Your Worship, committee recommends approval in accordance with Council's professional development and training policy for yourself, Mayor Sims, to attend the municipal symposium being held in Gander from April 29th to May 1st. And of course, that is being put off by municipalities Newfoundland, Labrador, and
It's an annual
of which
event.
we are a member, and it's a conference which we always attend. And I so move.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Contrary-minded, motion carried.
And we have one other item outside the package, Your Worship. It's a donation request from the Mount Pearl Intermediate Volleyball Team, and we're recommending approval to provide a $200 donation in support of 7 Mount Pearl members of the Mount Pearl Intermediate School Grade 9 volleyball team who will be attending a national volleyball tournament in Sherbrooke, Quebec, May 6th to the 10th, and I so move.
Moved, seconded. Question or comment? All those? I'm s-
I look forward to seeing the results of that tournament, because apparently that team are really quite skilled. They're contenders.
Very good. They've earned the right to go. All those in favor? Contrary-minded, motion is carried. We are now up to economic development. Councillor Stoyles.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have a couple of items. The Economic Development Committee is recommending that the Deputy Mayor and our Director of Planning, Stefan Yurchek, attend the All Show in Calgary, which is May 3rd to the 6th, and I so move.
That's actually in Houston,
Houston,
not Calgary.
Calgary. I did say Calgary. It is Houston.
I'm sorry. Okay, we have our deputy mayor going, and we also have the city planner is attending, right?
Yes, Your Worship.
Those are the two. All right. Moved by Councillor Stoyles, seconded by Councillor Locke, by Deputy Mayor Locke. All those in favor? Contrary-minded, motion is carried.
We had quotations for the community review, which is 10,000 copies, and we're recommending that it go to the lowest bidder, which is Imprint Printing Solutions, and at $6,817.12, and I so move.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion is carried.
The community review, of course, goes to all the households. Now we have the community profile, which goes to the businesses, and of course, again, we call for tender, and this is for 500 copies, and we're recommending that it go to the lowest bidder again, Imprint Solutions, at $5,338.14, and I so move.
Moved and seconded. This is the community
This is
profile.
the
We're only
community
printing
profile.
500 of the community
Yeah,
profile.
this goes to businesses, Your Worship,
Right.
and this
Yep.
is
Okay.
different in the review.
Right on. Thank you. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion is carried.
And that's all for us.
And that's all. There was one item here I see from okay, it says planning and development, but that's, you just did that, right? That was the only one. Okay. Very quickly, go back to the minutes of the 23rd. Where did we start new business last week? Am I forgetting you again, brother? Man, I don't have you. Engineering services, go for it, my son.
Rise on a point of order, Your Worship.
Yeah, that you're still here, right?
I have a shortened report today, and I want to compliment my colleague, Councillor Tessier, for pinch hitting.
Who helped
for
you
me a
out
few
there?
minutes ago.
I don't have anything
Yeah.
here. That's why I'm.
We're on tab 8, Your Worship. Yeah. The first item we have is the replacement installation of traffic poles and control arms at
Oh,
the
I do.
intersection
Sorry.
of Park Avenue, Commonwealth Avenue, and Ruth Avenue.
Yeah.
Basically, we'll be keeping the lights and all that, but we need to get the new poles and arms in place. This work will go out to our, we have an agreement, basically a standing offer agreement with Lighting and Traffic Systems Limited, and the value of the work is $36,883.20 plus HST, and I so move.
Moved and seconded by Councillor Stoyles. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried.
And the final item, Your Worship, is the Glacier Arena expansion. We have a change order. It's change order number 5. It's in the amount of $6,072. And it relates to an increase for the supply and installation of roof decking for the east and west canopies in the amount of $6,072. And as I understand it, basically, when the tender went out, this wasn't on the drawing, so naturally we can't expect the contractor to do this work. It wasn't part of the original spec, so hence we need the change order, and I so move. That change order, by the way, will go to Magna Contracting and Management, who are our contractor for the Glacier expansion.
For the Glacier expansion.
Worship, I just had a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Lane.
I think from the explanation, obviously, this is now going to be contingency money, obviously.
Yes.
But I thought at one point in time we had talked about having some process so we know what's contingency and what is just pieces that were carried over from
That had been included
future,
from contract to
yeah,
contract.
and that type
Yeah.
of thing. And so I'm just wondering where we're to with that, and maybe we can have an update at some point in time as to exactly where we are to on our contingency versus some of this other stuff.
Might be able to get one right now, Mr. Lewis.
That is contingency, and yes, I can provide you with an update, but we're still within the revised amount of contingency that we have, and we're still not even close to that amount yet. But I'll provide you with an actual updated amount of that.
Good. We'd like to have that. Thank you very much. We're up to new business. Councillor Aker, we're going right to left today.
Nothing, Your Worship.
Councillor Walsh.
Just one very quick thing, Your Worship. I had another email, and I brought this same matter up, and it was probably about this time last year. I had an email from Corona Brophy, actually, on McGill Crescent.
Yeah.
Some members of council
You know Corona.
know Corona through his Celtic fiddlers and different things of that nature. She raised the issue again of the lack of highway signage coming into Mount Pearl at the various exits, particularly coming, west to east into the towards Mount Pearl and St. John's. It doesn't just apply to us in terms of the poor signage. And she sent me an email this week saying, has anything happened with that since? I did raise it in the chamber before. I'm going to raise it again because I think from a tourism perspective in particular, I believe her husband Bill actually does some of the tours with the various tour groups in the summertime, and he'd probably be a little more sensitive and tuned into the the lack of signage. People say to them, in fact, and she mentioned in the email, how in the heck do you ever know where you're going? And of course, if you live in an area and you're familiar with it, you hardly need signage. But the signage is beneficial for people who are not familiar. And this is a very difficult place to find your way around. It's not gridded and square like most cities or large cities or even regions. So I just want to raise that again, and perhaps somebody with our staff could take that into consideration and follow up on that. The other thing she mentioned, and she didn't mention in this email, but I agree with her, at the top of the overpass, at the top of Ruth Avenue, there's an area that goes up to the water tower there. That, because of some of the traffic, and probably most of it, probably shouldn't be going there actually, but it's always in a tremendous mess, and it is one of the major gateways coming in and exiting the city, but particularly coming in. It's the first major exit into Mount Pearl off the Trans-Canada Highway. And I just wondered if there's anything we could possibly do to improve, how that looks. It's really, I'm not sure who it is, but if it's transportation, provincial government, St. John's. I didn't think it was St. John's. Is it in? Well, again, if it is St. John's, maybe there's something we could do, or even work with them in partnership, because I think it's in our best interest in terms of the aesthetics of the city, particularly as you come in, to improve that. Because it really, this time of the year, it's worse, but everything looks pretty.
There comes a point, I understand, Councillor Walsh, sorry to interrupt you.
Yep,
but
no, go ahead, please.
For understanding or clarification. There comes a point where that area at the top of Ruth Avenue, which really you'd almost call it Ruth Avenue Extension, really, once you get through the lights there, that road continues. That road at some point is going to be developed and go on into the Southlands, probably right into, I believe, as far as the golf course. I mean, this is going to be a big loop that takes in the other piece of Southlands. So whatever we would do there or want to do there would be somewhat temporary. But I do think we should, and if it's the city of St. John's, we should ask them either that they do something or that we do something. I think I really do agree with what you're saying. That could be spruced up. There's a lot of cars use it. They park there because they go berry picking and all kinds of stuff into that tree line.
I think they're actually even carpooling. They're dropping their cars off. They're carpooling, leaving the vehicle there, going downtown or wherever.
Yeah. So
there are cars that appear to be left there throughout the day at times of the year where you wouldn't think they'd be doing things like berry pick. I'm sure some of that goes on. And notwithstanding the longer-term plan for the development of that, maybe there is something we can do. And I just think we could do it in consultation with the city of St. John's. Sure, if you could.
Yeah, Mr. Lush.
Yes, Your Worship. I think actually, if you recall, the province is upgrading those ramps in that area this year, so there should be some improvement. They're planning on, I think, extending a bit of that road. Is there cemetery lands in there? You may know better, but they are improving that ramp area.
I believe there are. I believe there is a cemetery land plot in there.
There is some work happening. The ramp is being upgraded, so there is an opportunity, I believe.
So paying attention to that particular corner.
Thank you.
That's good. Thank you, Mr. Lush, for the information.
That's it for me.
Thank you. Mr. Aker, you want to respond to this?
The land, as I understand it, is owned by, of all people, the Housing Corporation, and it represents the other end of Southlands Boulevard.
Right.
And there may be some undertaking in the next few years to open up the cemetery lands, in which case they would push through. And eventually that will all hook up with the other end of Southlands Boulevard, which will form, if you will, a loop, basically, coming from one end of Southlands
to the other.
to
That's
the other.
always that was always the plan.
That's all I wanted. It's in the area of that ramp. As far as I know, it's in. I don't know the
No,
number
there
of
isn't
feet.
one there. It's land zoned for it.
Oh, zone for a cemetery.
And I understand what the issue is Holy Sepulchre here is getting full.
That's right.
And essentially, they will need new land, I guess, to bury people. I can't speak as to the time frame, but sooner rather than later, let's say, right? So that's all I can add.
Yeah. No, that's good. But Councillor Walsh's suggestion is a good one. Mr. Yefchek, you want to speak to this as well?
Yes, Your Worship. In terms of the cemetery, it's located above the 190-meter contour, actually right up on the hill. If you look at Ruth Avenue, it's to your right-hand side, up on the hill. And as I understand it, it's actually two cemeteries. One is a Protestant cemetery, the other one is a Roman Catholic cemetery. And very much like Councillor Akers just said, Holy Sepulchre is running out of room. I believe they have capacity for another 5 years. So that's probably the time frame you're looking at in terms of getting the other cemetery up and running.
Well, hopefully then with the upgrades to the ramps, we can either ourselves or with our colleagues in St. John's do something to improve that corner. Councillor Stoyles, your turn.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a couple of things. I received a number of calls this week concerning garbage in our pathways and everything, and as I did tell residents that our crews are out and starting to clean up and that. But this morning I walked Old Placentia Road and I couldn't believe the mess that came from some of the businesses, especially the takeouts. So I'm wondering if we could write them a letter, especially all the takeouts around Old Placentia Road and around the school areas, asking them to not only clean up the lot, but down around in the ditches and everything, because I couldn't believe the whole area that I walked this morning, because I walked almost from Donovan's right to the other end of Old Placentia Road, and I couldn't believe. And when I got up past the Reed Centre, I got on the pathway to walk down to my house, to have a shortcut, and in the pathways, I counted 2 mattresses. I don't know how many boxes and stuff in the pathways. So it's unbelievable the amount of garbage that's.
It's every spring. It's every spring.
Actually, I saw 2 election signs, and actually they were from the last election. I'm going to inform the people whose signs they were after tonight's meeting, but it was 2 election
Anybody
signs.
here?
Actually, it is. Somebody here sitting on council, and I will let them know exactly where the sign. I will let them know exactly where the sign is. But it's certainly unbelievable. Like I said,
Well,
I couldn't believe the mattresses. I guess mattress and back spring was what I saw.
You bring up a good point. Our director of community services is not here. I do know that the spring campaign, the spring cleanup, is pretty well being planned right now. So I would imagine in the next week or so we'll start to see some activities towards cleaning out, because every spring it's a mess. It really is.
The other thing I want to mention, Your Worship, is the North East Avalon Joint Council. The next meeting is on the 21st of April.
April 21st.
And it's in Paradise, and Minister Whalen is the guest speaker at that meeting.
Oh, wonderful.
And I thought I'd let the rest of the council know so they would have some time to put in the books.
Calendars.
The calendars.
Get it in your BlackBerry.
That's right, if they were interested in coming. It's 7:30 and it's at the town of Paradise, and Minister Whalen will be speaking at that meeting.
Wonderful.
And the 21st of April. It's always the third. It's always the third Wednesday of every month, and of course it travels.
Yeah, we're going to have the youth of the year awards public speaking contest is here that night.
Oh.
So that's going to make it tight. Yeah.
Well, maybe we can get in afterwards.
Get somebody there. Okay, thank you very much. That it? Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
A couple of items here, Your Worship. The first, I spoke with Mr. Yevchek prior to the meeting. I spoke to the residents this morning regarding the intersection of Old Placentia and Smallwood Drive up here by the Reed Community Centre, and in particular with respect to two of the turning lanes. So if you're heading south on Old Placentia and you're turning left to head down Smallwood Drive, and if there's any cars in the turning lane across from you, you can't see if there are any cars coming in the 2 straight lanes. So this resident asked, is it possible to sort of stagger them? So if that lane in front of me, they're turning left to go to the Reed Centre, I'm turning right to go down Smallwood. They can't see around me to see what's coming up. Very dangerous, because the cars are traveling at good speeds here. So the request was, could we possibly, and if we're doing work this year on the intersection, could we take out say 3 or 4 car lengths of the median or the boulevard there, and sort of stagger those 2 lanes? Then you'd have a clear visibility of the oncoming traffic. I know when I'm heading up there to turn down Smallwood, if there's a car parked or turning left in front of me, I will not venture out. It's not worth the risk, because you can't see what's coming until you're actually out into the lane.
Yeah.
But if that lane was staggered a little bit, or my lane was staggered a little bit, you'd have greater visibility for there. So I just want to mention that and put it to Mr. Lush and his committee, and maybe they can have a look at that and see if it's
a left turning arrow.
Well, no, it's a sight problem. You have, by the way,
you do have the arrow.
No, you do have the arrow.
But let's say the arrow's off and then your light is green. You can't see,
I know what you're saying.
and it is a hazard.
you have the very same thing, by the way, at Ruth Avenue. If you go up Old Placentia Road to Ruth Avenue, coming in the park now. If you want to turn down to Ruth Avenue, turn left, and you're there waiting for that light, the traffic that's in the turning lane to go out
Yes, up by Wendy's.
Yeah,
Yes.
right. You're very hesitant to say, I'm going to go out and cut across, because you really can't see the through lane, because it almost needs to be shifted a little bit.
Yes.
I know. We should let Mr. Lush have a look at all of that, and they might be able to do something with those sight
You're
lines.
not going to edge your way out is what I do, right?
Yeah, it's a sight
Right.
line issue.
So I just wanted to bring that forth. And
That's
the other
good.
item I just wanted to mention, of course, is the students are still on Easter break, so, out on walking the weekend, the number of people still speeding. I just want to draw to residents' attention again to keep an extra eye for the little
kids.
kiddies on their school break. That's it, Your Worship. Thank you.
Be careful, be careful. Thank you. Councillor Lane.
Two quick items. First one relates on, and again, I guess this is a question for Mr. Lush, perhaps. Do we have any money budgeted for to maintain what we've done out here in the square? And why I ask that is, as we know, we invested significant dollars into the square in terms of all these decorative poles and rails and that park and so on. If you go out, you look at it there now, a lot of the green paint is chipped off in different places, rust showing through in areas. There's a couple of bollards with like a light on it. There was one right here by Fabutan that the light on top of the bollard is missing, and so on. So I thought at the time when we had put the money into the square that it was recognized at that point in time that there would be monies dedicated to the maintenance of that. I don't recall, now that I think about it, I don't recall seeing anything in the budget, specifically a specific line item saying Centennial Square maintenance. Now maybe it would fall under a more general category, but I would like for us to have a look at that, because it is starting to look shabby. Even over there in the park, the wooden rails and so on, all the varnish is all scaled off it, and it looks really bad. So,
Again, I agree with you, but again, I think it all goes to community services that they put together to clean up plan, and I would imagine a lot of that will fall to them as well. But you're right about some physical damage here in the square with things that are busted.
I know. Like for example, I was talking to Gerard Philpott. I saw him out here on the way into the meeting, and he was actually sizing up the square at that point in time in terms of, the trees and the shrubs
flowers
and all
and-
that kind of stuff, right? And that's kind of what drew my attention to it.
Yeah.
But when I looked at it, I said, well, who's going to paint this? It's all green paint. It looks very nice, but now it's starting to look really shabby looking.
Yeah.
So who's painting this?
Yeah.
So I would ask that we look at that.
Yeah.
And the only other item I have, and this comes up every year again, but I did have a resident I ran into a supermarket who raised the issue of cats. I know it's an ongoing issue, but just to remind residents, you cannot have cats out roaming. They do cause damage to other people's property in terms of the odor that they leave behind, in terms of destroying plants and flowers and all that kind of stuff. And just a reminder,
They're supposed to be on a leash, the same as a dog.
Well, they're supposed same as a dog, but of course, what happens, as you know, Your Worship, for some reason, people seem to have two perceptions when it comes to a dog. People seem to get it. Most people do. You have your dog on a leash, but a lot of people still think it's okay to sort of open up the door and let the cat go on.
Yeah.
And then show up at some point in time when he purrs at the door, let him in.
Yep.
You just can't do it. And so we'll obviously put out the traps and so on if required, if we have complaints. But just to remind residents that they cannot have their cats out roaming.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Councillor Tessier.
Thank you. Just two very quick items. When we had the letter in our correspondence from the Minister about the Animal Health and Protection Act, I know that we had people who were anxious to hear the planning report. But I'm hoping, I guess I would implore the government, as they're constructing this draft legislation, that they'll actually increase the fines to the point where they will be preventative. Right now, they really are insignificant. And I would also be certainly open-minded as one person to see it go beyond fines as well, depending on the severity of the situation, if there is an animal abuse case. But again, I'd implore the provincial government to make sure that the fines are preventative. We want to see all this animal abuse actually stop, as opposed to being able to adequately punish somebody for something. We want to see it not happen at all.
Yeah, to be a deterrent.
Yes. And to Councillor Stoyle's point about the debris around Old Centre Road, a couple of years ago we talked about having some kind of correspondence with the supermarkets in that area, and we talked about at the point of sale, when somebody's going through the checkout, if they have flyers in their car, because we know that they blow around. We know when people leave their flyer or their carts in the car corral, the flyers blow around. And we had talked about proposing the idea that at the point of sale, their cashiers would say, "Are you finished with your flyers? Can I take them for you and recycle them?" Because we're into that, we're into the green initiatives, and we're all trying to be very concerned about our environment. And the supermarkets are certainly promoting it with their green bags as well. So I just want us to see if we can follow up on that to see if anything came of that suggestion at the time, because that would certainly cut down on a lot of the mess. Because we know that if we were to go over and look, a lot of it would be supermarket flyers. So if we could even revisit that with the supermarket managers to see if we can encourage them with their staff to partner with us on that.
Yeah, maybe to have something really visible there about recycling.
Yeah,
that's a good idea.
Even a recycling bin as you're going. Don't need your flyers. Recycle them here.
Yeah.
Something simple.
All right. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
That's new business. That's the program. Who's going to call for adjournment today? Councillor Stoyles. We moved adjournment. We stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody. How did you find the microphones, by the way? Did everybody handle it okay? I don't think anybody had any difficulty with